Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're focusing on a truly fascinating aspect of psychology, the actual mechanics of the therapeutic relationship. When we think of therapy, we usually picture the techniques, right? The diagnoses, the coping strategies. But underneath all of that, the absolute bedrock of any successful treatment is the human connection itself. So today, we're going to unpack exactly what this therapeutic alliance is, how it works, and why it's just so incredibly powerful. Okay, let's dive into this. It's a question practically everyone asks when they first start looking into psychotherapy. What actually makes a therapist different from a really good friend? I mean, think about it. You sit in a room, you talk about your deepest feelings, your fears, your hopes, and the other person listens and supports you. Sounds exactly like friendship, right? Well, not quite. The boundaries and the specific structure of this dynamic make it something entirely different, and honestly, far more specialized than any social bond we experience in our everyday lives. To really get this, we need to define our foundational concept. In psychology, this special connection is known as the therapeutic relationship or the therapeutic alliance. At its core, it's a voluntary partnership. You've got someone seeking treatment, the client, and someone providing treatment, the therapist. But the real key here is the purpose. This isn't just about grabbing coffee and enjoying someone's company. The sole aim of this alliance is to help the client solve the psychological problems they're facing. It's literally the core vehicle that makes therapeutic change possible. And this relationship is highly unique. It's often described as neither a passing acquaintance nor a permanent relationship. I want you to really stop and think about how distinct that is. It occupies this highly specific, totally temporary space in a person's life. It's not just someone you casually nod to at the grocery store, but it's also not a permanent fixture like a sister or a lifelong best friend. It is an intensely deep connection that is purposefully designed to eventually end. Let's move along and see how this builds into the very structure of the alliance. There are basically two major components that define this bond. First up, we have its contractual nature. That simply means two willing individuals are actively entering into a structured partnership with one very specific goal: helping the client overcome their problems. Second is the limited duration. As we just touched on, this alliance literally comes with an expiration date. It's meant to last only until the client becomes able to deal with their problems and take back control of their own life. The whole point here is empowerment, definitely not lifelong dependency. Now, for this temporary contract to actually work, the level of trust has to be off the charts. We're looking at two very distinct roles here. On one side, you have the client, who unburdens themselves, confiding deeply personal psychological problems. And on the flip side, we have the therapist. The therapist actually encourages this unburdening by maintaining a stance that is accepting, empathic, genuine, and warm. They have to convey through absolutely every word and behavior that they are completely and utterly non-judgmental. Which brings us to a massively important psychological concept: unconditional positive regard. Now, it's one thing to be warm when someone is being super pleasant, right? But the therapeutic alliance demands something way harder. The therapist must maintain positive feelings toward the client, even if the client is acting rude, or if they confess to thinking or doing things society considers wrong. By not judging the client under any circumstances whatsoever, the therapist creates the ultimate psychological safety net. The client essentially learns, hey, this is the one place in the world where I won't be rejected for my flaws. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the emotional core required to pull it off: empathy. To truly accept someone without judgment, a therapist absolutely must possess empathy. We hear it described all the time as simply putting oneself in the other person's shoes. And sure, that sounds simple enough, but clinically, empathy is a highly active, incredibly complex skill that requires the therapist to step outside of their own worldview entirely. To really get what empathy is, we actually have to look at what it isn't. There's a really sharp line between sympathy and empathy. When you feel sympathy, you have compassion, maybe even pity for another person's suffering. You feel sorry for them, but you aren't actually able to feel like the other person. But empathy goes so much further. It happens when you aren't just observing someone's plight from the outside, but you're actually able to feel like they do. You're experiencing their reality with them, not just looking down at it with pity. Empathy is also completely different from simple intellectual understanding. Intellectual understanding can be pretty cold. It means you might logically, rationally comprehend the facts of a person's situation, but you are entirely unable to feel like they do. You might not even feel sympathy. Therapy requires so much more than just cold mental comprehension. The therapist has to emotionally resonate with the client to truly grasp their perspective. Logic alone just isn't going to build that alliance. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when those elements come together. When a therapist successfully combines unconditional positive regard with true empathy, when they actually step into the client's shoes without a shred of judgment, something incredible happens. It transforms the alliance into a genuine healing relationship. It's not just about dispensing advice. This specific, carefully maintained emotional environment is the actual tool that fosters human healing. It's a real game changer. So, the crucial point is that because this relationship requires such deep vulnerability and trust to achieve that healing, it has to be protected at all costs. The therapeutic alliance requires strict confidentiality. Literally everything a client discloses, every single experience, event, feeling, or passing thought must be kept utterly secure. The therapist is bound by a strict ethical duty to never, in any way, shape, or form, exploit the trust and confidence that the client has placed in them. And that protective boundary leads us to a really vital reminder. Despite the immense warmth, the deep empathy, and that profound personal connection we've been talking about, this alliance is fundamentally a professional relationship, and it absolutely must remain so. It is not a friendship. It's a highly specialized professional bond constructed for one single purpose: helping the client navigate their psychological distress and ultimately regain control of their life. I want to leave you with a thought to reflect on today. Think of a friend, or even a character you know, who has recently gone through a negative or traumatic life event. If you actively put yourself in their shoes, like if you really try to experience how they are feeling and what they are thinking from their unique perspective, rather than just offering cold logic or pity, how would that change the way you support them? Clinical empathy might be a professional tool for therapists, but practicing it in our daily lives can profoundly change how we connect with the people around us. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring those perspectives.